Hello, hello.
Hey.
This is Biweeklycast. We are here. The hosts are the same. I'm Dima engineer at Meta.
I'm Slava CEO at Sevi.
And today we have a book club episode where we are going to discuss what are we talking about? You can maybe tell that we are coming out of holiday break and are out of shape a little bit. But this is a book club episode, and lo and behold, we are going to discuss a book.
Yeah, and that's a Ukrainian author, Natalia Zaviruha. The book could be translated like Uncontrollable.
Yeah, uncontrollable, or as you said, maybe unmanageable as well. And this is a book about business processes and how to define what you need to know about business processes.
Fair enough. And I guess we could start with overall impressions, because I think this is the first book across many that we discussed that we have very different opinions about.
Right, and also I'd say this is the first book we are reading, which is only, I guess, available in Ukrainian and not in English, right? And for me, this is a first business book in Ukrainian that I read in a long while, because like for longest time now I'm reading business books in English.
Yeah, maybe one day they get to the translation so people could appreciate it, but we are not going to get too deep into the quoting, so I think that shouldn't be an issue for this episode.
Sounds good. I think you suggested we read and discuss this book, so maybe you start with describing what impressed you about the book and why you thought it would be a good idea for us to chat about it.
Okay. A disclaimer, I'm maybe biased because I know the author and I like the author. So it might be part of the reason why I like the book. But I think that while reviewing the book, I read it a few years ago and I reviewed it before our episode. I took, let me count, 9 notes to discuss with my team for different areas. And we even took this book for an internal book club with a few of managers that work at Sevi. And that doesn't happen very often to me. Like normally I just look through the books. I have an idea, maybe 2 ideas, and that's it. So that seems more fruitful. This is something I wanted to refer. And on top of the cake, I think that this book unlocked my willingness to write a book of my own. Like I've been rejecting this idea for years, saying like, no, I don't have anything to say. I don't know how to structure it. I don't know how to write it. After reading this book, I think I could totally do a book about OKRs and strategy in a similar style.
It's interesting. So then let's get to it. And
I've kind of spoiled that you probably have a different opinion.
I think to me, the book was relatively difficult to read, not because it's in Ukrainian, but I think I had a hard time figuring out what the book is trying to say and kind of what the message is and what are the things that are more specific that the book is trying to convey rather than more general things that are borderline common sense.
What had to change in the book?
I think the biggest thing for me was the two biggest things, I guess, were a lack of structure, I guess, because I think that the book keeps talking about how do we translate it into English? Процесний підхід, process approach, something. I'm not sure. Like, I don't recall hearing such term in English, so I'm having a little bit of a hard time translating into English. But the book talks a lot. Like the entire book is about installing like process approach into companies, but it doesn't define what the process approach is.
I think that they basically refer to BPM, business process management, as the typical way to run the process.
Maybe, but what it is, like the book talks about that, and it says like we're doing BPM. Like, what does it mean? Because the book.
What's project management like?
No, but I didn't feel like that there is a proper definition of like what is a business process and what it means to have a description or the definition of a business process, and these things make it a little bit difficult for me to understand what it is that we're really talking about. So those are kind of basically two big things, like the weak on overall structure of the book and lack of definitions and precision in the language.
All right, let me argue a bit. I think that you're wrong here, and speaking about the definitions, page 12 of the paperback book actually says that there is community of people who are interested in business process management, and there is a suggestion that basically there is a definition from the Guide of Business Process Management Common Body of Knowledge, like PMBOK, but for...
Yeah, I know, yeah.
And basically they suggest the definition of BPM and the business process is the set of activities that are repeated in time and aimed at creating value for internal and external clients. That seems to me like quite a clear definition, and most of the examples later in the book meet this definition. So it's the very first chapter of the book, and I think it's clear enough.
Maybe. Well, it would be hard for me to argue. Like, yeah, I'm reading the sentence in the book as well, but for whatever reason, I didn't feel like I don't even think that there is a real how do I put it, complete example of a business process that would match or illustrate different points discussed by the book. And I think maybe it is that through the book it refers to different concepts and notions, and maybe doesn't do, at least in my opinion, sufficient job of articulating, like, of providing, say, negative examples of like what is not a business process or what description of business process is not sufficient, or things like that.
And once again, I have to disagree. And I think that one of the clearest differentiations was actually the contrast. I can't find the specific page, but they were contrasting projects and processes. And that's exactly how I see things in my company. Like when I look at, let's say, our BizDev team, there are some projects that we're on, like launching a new CRM system. It is a project. It has an aim.
Yep.
It has the starting point, ending point. When it's done and we've built up everything, then we use the CRM system. And there is a process of operating around it. Not just the CRM itself, but basically it's the process of how we manage our clients' information. There is some input. It's somehow managed, operated, stored, saved, protected, reviewed, deleted, etc. And it's repeated every time there is an input, there is a new client, and it's not a project anymore. So quite often projects that we run, they at the end shape a business process that is later described either as text, manual, table, graph, guideline on top of the page or something. And used by people who have to use it. Even when we do our monthly review, we discuss the number of projects we've been working on, and we discuss changes in processes that have happened. Like, has the screening meetings flow changed? Or have we changed the way we illustrate our offers? Have we changed the presentation styles or something else that might have changed in the past month in the regular things that we do repeatedly?
No, I guess that's fair. I would not disagree, and that would match my definition of processes and projects as well, and a distinction between them.
Yeah, and I think that the way I see that many people, at least in the Ukrainian context, have a tendency to confuse them, and whenever they have to there are some things happening in their teams or in their projects or in their companies, and in order to fix them, they try to write a policy. Policy is like the very first thing that comes to my instruction, a guide or something to control things. And then these policies don't work. That was a stage in Soviet management style quite a while ago, that we did have a stockpile of policies that were just read by managers and a few people, and everyone else just ignored them because there were too many of those. And that's a negative example. Like you wanted to see like how.
Yeah, but and so if we stick to this particular thing, you say that the problem, or at least an example or an instance of a problem when the process approach isn't used, is that there is a stockpile of policies that are written as a precedence, maybe kind of body of guidance, and then no one reads it, and so on and so forth, and all sort of problem come out of that. How does the and this is half honest question, like how does the process approach or what described in the book is fixing that? Because the book says, okay, like we define, we have descriptions of business processes in, like you said, textual, tabular, or graphic form. How stockpile of process descriptions is better than stockpile of guidance and policies that we had prior to that?
I don't say it's better. It might be better. Plus, if we look at the level of, I think it was chapter 2 or something, about the levels of maturity of business processes, that sometimes they just exist and they're not described, then they're being brought to the awareness level, then they become managed, then they're measured, and then they get improved. And the improvement is the process of reviewing the process itself. I think that when people see the policy, they kind of interpret it as a law or an instruction that things should work that way. And with the approach that is described here by Natalia, it seems to me that you kind of perceive it a bit differently than just the right way to do stuff. It's something that illustrates the way the stuff is done. Then there is a try to control it, to calculate it, and see whether the way the stuff is done can be improved. And the way people change their attitude towards these documents. Not necessarily like it's my interpretation that was not part of the book, but that was probably my answer to your question.
So I think one other point of criticism there, I think I was trying for myself to define what this book is about, and the best answer to that question that I came to is this book is about how projects of defining, documenting, and maybe optimizing business processes in a company ought to be done from consultant's point of view. Is it a fair characterization?
I would agree with most of it. Not sure about the consultant's point of view, but the rest seems fair.
Right. And then I guess two issues with that I have, not specifically with what this book is about, but what it describes. I think it glosses over two facts, even though the book itself, it says that if you have a business, you have business processes. They may not be documented and stuff like that, but you have, if company delivers something, there must be some sort of a process to do that. So the company does that, but then it kind of, through this project of defining and improving business processes, it kind of almost neglects that fact. And the best thing that is done is, we talk to people in meetings and ask them to define processes. Like, what do we mean? Like, you can go in and observe and shadow, and kind of there are so many more ways which are going to be more effective to understand existing processes that the company uses and kind of define and optimize them. So that's one. It kind of almost kind of neglects what's there, and the.
Did you get a feeling that it was described as the best way or the only way to do that? Because I thought it was just an example how it can be done.
I got an impression that it was the only. I think it's the only way that's suggested by the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's well. I have three things now. So like that's this thing. The second thing would be that what happens after the project, the process, the project ends. Like, okay, we defined those business processes. What happens then? How we transition from a bunch of paperwork that we created as part of describing and maybe optimizing those business processes. How do we get them implemented? There is a little bit about that in the book. That's fair. Like, how do we get? But this is still a question. How do we get those processes implemented effectively? And then on top of that, and I don't think there is anything about that in the book, how do we get to that fifth level of maturity of continuous improvement, which the book alludes a little bit to, and I don't think it tells anything about that. And with that, my huge fear would be that, like, we've created a whole bunch of paperwork, and it's going to lie there. Like,
I don't think it's about
changed?
Paperwork. At least the way I see it in actual, client businesses cases, when they try to optimize the processes, what actually happens there is that they get names for things they haven't named previously. Let's say strategic planning. They did some kind of planning. It was just never a thing that would repeat, and there would never be an accountable person for that. It would happen somehow, sometime, in different ways, depending on the mood, style, and something. And when it's described once, when you get to the second iteration, like let's say half a year passed or a year passed, firstly, there is an accountable person for that. Something that was named like an owner, but basically it's a responsible or accountable person who is supposed to manage the process when it starts again and make sure that it's happening either according to the description, or there are some changes made or adaptations if needed. And this is where this continuous improvement happens.
Yeah, well, I think that this is where the shortcoming of super generic definition of set of actions that repeat in time and have an aim of creating value for internal and external clients kind of come. Like, I almost want to be kind of more specific, because I would not be. I get it that there is certain benefit maybe to having a process around strategic planning, but I also can very much see that if you do this once a year, like how bad is it that we run this, like each strategic planning season, if we run this as a project rather than kind of repeated process?
You could. It's choice. You don't have to in this specific case. But if I give you a few more examples of processes, an email campaign could happen weekly, for instance. An event that we put together could happen monthly, daily, weekly, I don't know, whatever. Onboarding a new client for B2B companies happens quite often. Dealing with complaints and reclamation when something goes wrong. What is the standard procedure that we do when something isn't right? Etc., etc. Like there are dozens of examples that could be tactical. There are some that are strategic, and they could happen with very different frequency. So I think that it doesn't really matter what the level is. But if you think that this is something like, let's say you integrate the objectives and key results as a system for goals, you have some hopes that you will at least give it 3 years to see how it works. Seems to me that you could build a process around it, not just run it as a 3-year long project.
And what would be repeatable there? Like what's the repeatable part?
The calibration part. Like you basically, the process means that you set the goals in the very beginning, and then with a specific frequency, let's say 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, you review them, and there is the way you do that. Like you analyze things, you get all the feedback from the stakeholders and the team, etc. Then you make changes, you get more feedback, you approve them, you communicate them, etc.
I think, like in my view, at least, kind of my view on the process is that what we want out of processes generally is predictable, like it says, process is set of repeatable action. So that out of process we want repeatability and predictability. Right? So we want to reduce kind of variations that we get out of particular actions or particular outcome or particular deliverable that we produce. And this is why we define processes, so that we want to be able to both kind of control how the output is produced and control kind of parameters with which that output is produced, which means also in turn that as an output of the process we are dealing with things that are generally kind of fungible, right? Like we produce same thing like over and over and over and over again, and we want to hopefully get better at how we do that.
Yep. Let's say that the documented results of your retrospectives seem to be the same level of details. Like there are screenshots attached, there are action points at the end, there is something else, like that there is a similar way for all retrospectives across the teams.
Right, but then like a contrarian question, what bad outcomes are going to entail if that doesn't happen? Like if you have a retrospective without, let's say, bullet points, like where the output is structured in a slightly different like way, what difference does it make really?
I would say that the processes may include quite a big level of flexibility and something you can customize. But let's say that you leave the team and then a new manager comes and takes your spot and doesn't really know how things were done previously, looks at the results of previous 5 retros, and they're all different. Like some of them have action points, some of them don't, some of them use the mind maps, some of them are charts, some of them are just text, some of them don't have anything. And it's kind of hard to see how things are done here.
Yes, maybe.
Which is so fine, yeah. But speaking about internal customers, your team could be considered as someone who is who's getting benefits from the retros. Like retros are done to improve something in the way you work. And if this chaotic process that was done previously created or generated the benefits, that's fine. If it hasn't, maybe it's time to try describing it and change something, and then agree that, guys, that's how we're going to do it next time, and see if it brings benefits again.
Right. No, also don't get me wrong. I'm not against defining or using process. I think kind of in my view, then, like I said, like if we have a business with goals and outcomes, things are going to get done with or without explicit definition of the processes, and that's one thing. And then on the other side, there are, in my view, that there are things that are worth describing as process and being like super formal about them. There are things that are less worthy of doing that, and like this process oriented approach, or however we call it, isn't the only kind of method of improving how businesses operate. And like I think that's one other things that I didn't get from the book. It doesn't feel to me like it kind of seriously acknowledges that it is like business processes are part of a bigger ecosystem, and there are things that are better done with processes versus better done with some other things, how processes relate or don't relate to corporate culture. Maybe there is one paragraph about that, and like how organizational structures play a role in how business operates with or without defined business processes, and so on.
Yes. On the other hand, I think that just even the heading, like the cover of the book, illustrates that there is the vision, mission, strategy, competences, metrics, structure, business processes is just part of this bigger system. So I think that you can't describe all business in 180 pages book, and you shouldn't. You just say, like, this is the element that we're going to talk about. Here is how it is defined. And that's how you could approach that.
Maybe. I think I would prefer if, yeah, I agree that you cannot cover everything under the sun in one book. But then which is my thinking, that there are like processes, organizational structures, and maybe kind of business, like overall business structure and corporate culture are elements that in my mind, if not, well, they're equally as important. And my expectation would be that if we take one of the elements, we at least make it situated within the bigger picture, which I don't feel like the book did a very good job of. It only and explicitly talks about business processes and using business processes to solve problems, including problems that I don't think are easily solvable by business processes alone, kind of without other elements of how business operates. So that's what gave me that impression of maybe overall focus on on business process in kind of borderline. If I have a hammer, everything looks like a nail type of a dynamic.
Interesting. Because I did see most of the points you mentioned. Like the book started with the phrase that guys, processes are not the silver bullet. You don't even have to start if you don't have proper managerial approach. You don't know where you're going, what your core business, who your client is, and what kind of value you're creating. Don't go into processes. It was like, on the first pages. And the things about the culture, the structure, and everything, as I mentioned, like it's straight on the cover, like as a separate thing. And I actually like this book because it doesn't get into most of these things, because Natalia has specific expertise in just one section here. And she dedicated the entire book to this section. Yes, this section doesn't fix business in general, which is fine. I don't think that any specific section fixes business in general, only all of them together. And that's not part of the book. And I like it this way. I think that people who try to build too many connections get lost in thought. And if, for instance, I have customers who put an OKR, we would like to improve X% of key business processes, I can completely just send them this book and say, like, guys, please take it for the book club before you start working on this goal. Because it's a very popular tendency in Ukrainian tech companies these days. People say that we would like to automate, we would like to integrate AI into blah, blah, blah processes. And I think that reading this could actually help. Or not.
But maybe not, because I think speaking of this particular example, the problem is not with business processes. The problem is that this, as a goal, something like that is just a plain bad goal, regardless of state of maturity of the company and things like that.
I disagree with you. I think that many businesses go through the stage where they have to sort things out. And it's not a bad goal for them to measure the level of sorted outness.
No, I definitely don't disagree with that. I'll be with you. I just disagree with the method. Like, if business needs to have something sorted out, the goal should be to sort out X, not to automate. Some automation is a method. It's not the
yeah. That's why they usually use the term optimize, not automate. And that was just a bad example.
I think it doesn't say that. Like what's the business? What is specific business outcome that we are trying to improve by optimizing? Like, how do we using the questions even from them, like how do we know that we optimized enough? How do we know that we optimized? Period.
Amount of resources used to.
Okay, so then
create
improve efficiency or
but
something.
Different processes have different metrics, right? Like, some of them are supported, some of them are production, some of them are something like, if you speak about accounting or legal or something, that they don't have the direct calculation, but they can get shorter, or like to a certain degree more clear, like not get too many change requests, or I don't know, whatever the issue is. If I think about accounting in different businesses, it might have their different challenges, and fixing those things might result the overall benefit and value for internal or external customers. I don't know who gets more value, internal or external, but I would say that making things shorter is just one of the examples, or like using less resources is one of the examples.
Right. But then that's a specific business outcome that we pursue, right? We now have average, 2 lawyers per contract that we put out, we want to reduce this to one. And this is a great goal. It can be done by different means, including improving and automating and optimizing business processes. But the goal is kind of business visible outcome defined in business terms, right?
That's the department one, like for the legal department, but for the business overall, like legal department improves something in terms of number of lawyers, accounting something else, sales something else, marketing something else. It all gets together into the percentage of processes across the departments that had their own criteria, that had their own goals that have been improved.
I would say that, like at the business level, like why do I care how many processes a particular department has and how many they have to automate? What I care is that if a department is a cost center, I look at like at a P&L sheet of my company and say that I need to reduce expenses by X amount, and we presumably want to do that via optimization, like whatever it may be, with departments XYZ. And then they look at how many processes they need to optimize, that they may count and do that the way they want. But at the business level, what I care about is that expenses in my bottom line are reduced by the amount I set target for. That's how I'd be thinking about this, and this is how I think that the percent of business processes optimized isn't necessarily a good kind of goal per se.
For me, it's harder because I don't think there are good goals at all.
That's a deeper philosophical question.
There are just goals that people believe in at the moment of time, and they think that that's something they should focus on. And I can say that, like, out of 22 strategic sessions I ran last year, about half of them operated somewhere around optimization of business processes. They had at least a section of their strategy devoted to that. So that would be 11. Not a very big amount, but half of all my strategic sessions seem quite representative.
This is interesting.
And once again, I don't say that is it the best way, the good way, an effective way to set the goals. I can state that such goals do exist across Ukrainian tech companies a lot.
It might be interesting to discuss why that is, but that's an interesting point.
Yeah, but I think why could actually go for another episode.
Right, and I'm not sure if we did justice discussing the book. We got a little bit of a on a tangent here and there. I think it was interesting. I think that there is a lot of food for thought in both the questions we asked and the answers we tried to come up with for those questions.
And what I specifically enjoyed is the way that normally I read books very similarly to the way you do. And right now, when I listen to the remarks that you made, like, I did see these things in the book itself. And it was really interesting how we interpreted pages differently, or interpreted different, like, I don't know. For me, your two biggest remarks about the clarity and the structure, I believe, like the definitions and the structure, were actually the two best things about the book. I think it gave the clarity and it gave the structure. And that's quite a unique case in our book clubs, which it was personally fun for me.
Yep, maybe we can have some follow-up discussions about some of the concepts that we discussed in the book.
Sure.
I guess with that, we will wish everyone good weeks or good books, however you call it.
whatever you call them.
Yeah, see you soon.